Welcome back. In this session, we'll be looking at Zapier and how we can utilize it to gain efficiency using automation. So let's jump straight into it and see what Zapier is all about. So what is Zapier? Well, Zapier is an app that automates actions in software that you're already using by linking your software or your apps and allowing you to even prototype and test potential solutions. Some examples of automations using Zapier are uploading of a new Zoom recording to Google Drive so that your participants can access the recording, a new feature request email that can be added to a spreadsheet. You may want to manage an ad form submission to a spreadsheet for management. You may even want to synchronize Dynamics 365 records to a Google Sheet. So there are many solutions available and many possibilities, but in order to understand Zapier automation, you need to be aware of the two main building blocks in its automation platform. The first is a trigger. So a trigger can be anything. It could be on a schedule, it could be an inbound email with a particular subject. It can even be a SQL or whatever your database is platform that you've got there. So you've got multiple different types of trigger points, and every automation will have a trigger point, and then the trigger will lead to an action. And there can be one or more actions, but there'll be at least one because the action is the workload that you want the automation to complete. So here we've got 3 actions. So what you could have is you could have a trigger, and then the first action could be to retrieve some records from Dynamics 365, for instance. So you could have a daily automation that retrieves a load of records from Dynamics 365, and then in here it could do some kind of manipulation on the second action. So we've got our first action here. The second action, we can then do some sort of transformation. And from that transformation, we could then have an action that will send something out in some sort of, let's say, Google Sheet, for instance. And that would be how an automation would look within Zapier. Now, if you look on the right, here we can see we've got an actual workflow or integration, or Zap, as Zapier call them, a single trigger, multiple actions, and then you've got different paths being set within those actions in order to complete the automation. Now, to get a better look at this and see how we would actually build this within the Zapier UI, let's log into Zapier now and see how we would do this in real time. So here is the main landing screen for Zapier. It's here on the left-hand side that you've got various options in order to discover different Zaps. So you may want to create a contact list, there may be a lead tracker. So you've got various elements here for popular sales pipeline templates, lead management, etc. here. You then have Zaps, which is where you're going to be spending most of your time. So a Zap is basically Zapier's term for an integration. So here you can create as many directories as you like, and then you can create a new Zap within that directory. So there's different ways of organizing your integrations. I've got a testing folder here, and actually we can create a new folder now called demos. And when we do that, we're able to go into this directory, and from here we can directly create a Zap, which will be created within that directory. So there are other UI elements here, but in this particular session, we're just going to really focus on Zaps, the creation of Zaps, and the organization of the UI in order to manage those. If we go back to home though, there is one element that's really interesting on this platform. It has built in its own AI model here that you can then use in order to basically request a template for a Zap. So it could be that you want to create a Zap or an integration that when a Teams call ends, you want to send an email to all the attendees. And you can do that just by typing here and then hitting submit. That will then use the AI model in order to query. And if it can understand what you've asked it to do, it will then bring back a template and the various different elements for that. So the trigger points and the actions here. So if we hit try it now, that will then basically, using the AI, has now built us a trigger point for Teams that we can configure, and then a trigger point to send an email. And it's as simple as that. And you've got the Copilot on the left that you can use in order to further query, integrate, and create your automations. Let's go back to the home. So we're going to go to Zaps, leave here, and let's look at actually creating a Zap. So it's scenario time. Let's say we have a list of content like YouTube videos or helpful tips that we want to post to our LinkedIn account on a weekly basis. And we just want to randomize that. So we've got a list of 20, 30 different articles, and every week we want to submit that to LinkedIn as a post. So how will we do this? Well, firstly, we need to have that source data. And in this scenario, we're going to use a Google Sheet. So I've already prepared a Google Sheet, and we're going to look at that now in order to understand the data and how that looks. So here we've got our Google Sheet. Every row within the sheet covers a different topic that we want to be able to post. So we've got a topic information here on SQL props and triggers, Azure Logic Apps, Boomi, etc. And then we've got column C, which dictates the details that we want to provide in our post. I've added a date added just as a reference point for myself as to when I added that to the list. And then we've got on column E whether it's ready for release. This column in particular is only really key for the last row because we're always going to fully define a row before we then go and look at adding a next row. So it could be that here we're looking at maybe covering something like, for instance, Clio's platform. And then we might want to put some details in here about it. And we might go, well, we're not quite sure how we're going to present that yet at the moment. So because of that, we're just going to leave the ready to release column as blank here. And that's absolutely fine. So that's what we're using this Excel sheet for. It's just around collating that information. So we've got a record for each post, each detail that we want to be able to put through into LinkedIn. And the concept of this solution is going to be that we want to randomize so that every week we're going to populate one of these in random to LinkedIn to keep it fresh so that we're providing value to our audience on a weekly basis. Now, we've got a lot of YouTube references on here, but it could be useful tips around anything that you want. It could be around articles, tech news, companies, whatever you wish. But that's what we're building this up based on. We've then got a column around row number, and we'll look at building up that and seeing what we need to supply in this Google Sheet in order to utilize it in the way we want to in order to create a random post on a schedule. So now we've covered the source data, let's look at creating a Zap. So we've got our demos directory, so let's go there first, and we want to create a Zap. So let's hit create. We're going to create a new Zap, and that then takes us to the canvas. I'm not worried about using Copilot. We're just going to create this afresh without using the AI piece here. So we've got to create a trigger. Now we know that our trigger here is actually going to be based on a schedule by Zapier. Let's select that. The moment we do that, we can then choose a trigger event. So the trigger event here is the frequency. So we're going to say every week. We can then hit continue, and then we can choose the day of the week. So we're going to do this on a Friday. And we're going to choose to post that on a Friday at 6 p.m. So let's go through, and then we can do that. So we select 6 p.m. Perfect, that's done. We can test this trigger, but we don't need to. We've got to choose our actions to set up our actions. So there we have it. We've created so far a schedule. Now the next step we want to do is we want to create a random number, or at least select a random row in our Google Sheet in order to post to LinkedIn. There are likely sort of many ways of doing this, but the way we'll handle this will actually require 3 action steps. So the first action step will be to find out how many rows are in our Google Sheet. The next will be to generate a random number within the range of the maximum row in that Google Sheet. And then lastly, we then want to return the associated row so that we can then post that to LinkedIn. Now, in order to progress and configure these actions, we need to set up our spreadsheet with a couple of extra columns. So let's have a look and see what we need to do for that. So we're now in our Google Sheet. What we firstly want to do is we want to configure our first column, which is around the row number. What we'd like to do is we'd like to have the row number populated where ready for release is Y for yes. So in order to do this, we can use a very simple function called equals if, and we can say if this cell equals Y, then return us the row number, otherwise blank. And if we hit enter here, we've now got populated here 2, and this is our formula. What we can do is we can double click this, and that will then populate all the row numbers for any record where we've got Y on it. And if we were to change this and remove the Y, the row number disappears. So that works as intended. But where it falls short is if we were to add another topic here. Say we wanted to cover clear integration with some details, etc. And we want to come back to this yet, and it's not ready for release to be included as part of our post to LinkedIn. You can see here it's not populating the row number because we haven't got that in there, but even when we put this in, it will populate this one. But now if we go next and do another one, so test, let's say test, and we put Y on here, it's missed it out. So it's guessed the formula and sort of put it on this row, but not on this one. So what do we want to do here? Well, what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to declare a formula at the top that is always populated where we've got a ready to release of Y without the need of us dragging it all the way down the end. And what you can do is you can use a slightly more advanced formula to achieve this. And it's called ARRAYFORMULA. So we're going to use ARRAYFORMULA, and we're going to pass ARRAYFORMULA our if statement. Now to get this working, we need to be able to pass it the full column. So if we put E, you can see we've highlighted the full column here, and we're going to do the same here. And now our formula is complete. So all we're doing is using ARRAYFORMULA and passing it the full column. If I hit enter now, equals ARRAYFORMULA. What have I got? Let's just check on here. That's because I've still got this populated. So let's delete the existing formula out. And there we go. I just need to remove the existing formula. So we can see here, there's no formula in our FX formula column for these, but there is for the top one because it's applied to the full column there. So that's our first step here. And we can see if we scroll down to the bottom, it's not been applied to clear integration because we haven't got the Y there. Now we put this in, it does, and it will continue to do this indefinitely. So we don't have to clean this up. That works really well there. Now what we want to do is we want to add an included column. So this is an indicator to say we want to include this in. So this is just the row number that we're going to use to grab the row or identify the row. And here we want to use this as to include it in our post to LinkedIn. So in a very similar way here, we're going to use almost the same formula. So we're going to equals array formula, and then we're going to have an if statement, and we're going to say if this here, which is going to be the full column, if that equals y, then we want to say true, otherwise we're just going to put blank. And there we go. So the main idea here is that we're going to call this spreadsheet. We're then going to do a bottom-up search, and we're going to say stop at the point we hit our first true. And that should be this row here. We're then going to go give me the row number, and that gives us the maximum row number, the last row number that exists. And then we can look at generating a random number between our last row, which is 14, and our first one, which is 2. So now this is ready. We can now go back to Zapier and start building our actions around using this Google Sheet. Right, so let's add our spreadsheet action, our Google Sheet action. So we're going to select that now, and then we've got to select an action event. And our action event here is going to be a lookup. So what we want to do is we want to find a spreadsheet row. So we're going to select that. If you haven't, you've got to configure the account. We've already got an account configured for this. We can then hit continue. We then need to find our file. So we're going to go on Google Drive. We're going to find our sheet. There it is, LinkedIn useful posts. And then we need to point to the worksheet. And we know this is just sheet 1, and we've got that. So we've configured that now. We then need to look at what the lookup column is. So as we discussed before, we want to do that based on our included column. Then we want to look for a lookup value. In this case, it's going to be true. And then, because we're going to be doing that bottom-up searching on here, so that should be pretty much most of what we need to do. Search from last row, we want true, because we actually want to search bottom up. So what we're doing here is we're not going top down, we're going bottom up. So we're going to search from the last row and go up. And at that point, we want to return. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through our spreadsheet from the bottom. We're going to start the bottom record, and has that got a included value of true? And if it does at that point, then we can return that row. If we've got a pending one where we haven't marked it as yes, that it's ready for release, then it will go on to the next and so forth. So if we go next, or continue, sorry, that's all fine on here, and then we can then hit test. So we're going to hit test and see what happens. So we've hit test and it's hit row 14. So let's go and have a look in our Google Sheet and see if row 14 is the bottom row and it's marked as included true. So we're on our Google Sheet, we go to included, and the first row, bottom up, is going to be this one, and that is 14. Now, for sake of testing, I'm going to put Clio in here and just, let's put waiting for details. And we're not going to mark this as yes. So let's see then what we get. So we've got our pending row for Clio in there. Let's do a retest, and we should still get 14 here. Yep, we do. Perfect. So we know we can have a pending row in there that we're waiting for further information because this is a working Google Sheet. That's absolutely fine. So now we've done that, this process here will actually return our bottom row, in essence, the last row that is got an included set to true. Now we need to get a random number, which will be between 2 and the last row in our sheet. So we're going to use Formatter by Zapier to do this. So we hit next step here. We can then choose Formatter, and we then have to choose an event. So the action event here is going to be numbers, because that's what we're dealing with. We can then hit continue, and then we've got a transform option here. So for here, what we want to do is we want to select spreadsheet style. So if we go here, that's what we want to do. We're going to do a spreadsheet style formula. And then here we can actually type the formula that we require. So there is a section which I'll show you shortly where it will give you a description of the various different formulas. For us, let's have a look at that now, because then we can have a look at, well, see what those particular formulas are, and then you can understand what one we need to use. Here we've got the standard help for Zapier, just around its built-in tools. We're using the formatter here, and then you've got a list of formula functions, and there are quite a number. So you've got things where you can provide averages, you've got your logic functions, all sorts of things here as well. So what we want to use is some sort of random generator. So we have got rand here, and this will return a number between 0 and 1, but that's not what we want here. We want to be able to provide a min and max. And it's this formula here we want to use. So we want to use rand between, which you can then provide two parameters, a minimum and a maximum, and it will return a random number between those two. So this is what we're going to use for the formula for our spreadsheet-based formula. Let's do that now. So now we've reviewed the available formulas, we know here that we can do rand between. And here we're going to pass the start number of 2, and then the end number we're going to take as our value of the row taken from the lookup spreadsheet step. So let's go on here, and we've got a row number here of 14. And then what we can do is just grab that formula, cut that, paste it in there, and then we can close that off. And then we can hit continue. So here now we can actually test the step in order to return a row, and we can see we've got an output of 7, 8, 2, 9, and we can basically keep testing this, and we know that we're going to get a random number. So we know this step is working. So what we've done now is we've got our maximum row, we've now got our random number. Now we need to add a step here, which is going to be very similar to our last Google Sheet one, where we will retrieve the random row that we want to pull. So let's do that now. So what we need to do is we need to choose an event, which is going to be a lookup. So lookup spreadsheet row, and then we can hit continue. And here we're going to choose Google Drive again. We're going to choose our sheet, which is LinkedIn Useful Posts. We know the worksheet is 1. Now the lookup column on here is actually going to be the row number. And the lookup value we can then take from our previous steps. Now I'm just noticing here actually we've got our step names, and these are the default names, but I think it'd be better if we give them a better name. So we can rename steps here. So this lookup spreadsheet row, really, I think a better name for that is get last included. Yeah, let's get last included row. And there we go. That renames. And then we can go on here, and this is just numbers. Well, it's not just numbers. This is actually going to get random row number. And then our current step on here will actually be get the random row. And then at least now we've got some better names being used. So going back to this, we've got our row number as our lookup column. We need to pass in the actual row number we want. So we're going to get that from our get random number process here. And we've got our output here. So we can grab that. Okay, so from here, everything else is looking okay. There's no supported bit there. Nope. And then we can hit continue. Now what we can do is we can actually test this. So we know we're passing in a 10. So let's test this step and see what we get. There we go. Okay, so here it's pulled back row number 10. So that's exactly what we would expect for this. So now what we can do is we can close this off. We've completed these 3 steps now. Now we've got the data we need. We can actually add our LinkedIn step. So we're going to select LinkedIn. I'm going to rename this now so we've got this so it reflects better. And we're going to call this create share update. Hit rename. Perfect. So we've got LinkedIn. We need to choose what the action event is. This is going to be create share update. We can then hit continue. And now we've got various fields we can populate here on the right around the LinkedIn function. Now for us, we're going to make it visible for everyone. We're then going to select what the comment's going to be, and we're going to get that from our get random row. And here we know that the information we want to post is actually the post detail. So we're going to select that. And for us, that's all we need. Now we could make this post, or at least the Excel sheet, different in the sense that we can add a URL to an image, and we can add sort of content titles and descriptions and things like that. But this is going to be fairly straightforward. If we wanted to put an image in there with all of the content we've got in there as well, we can have that as a separate column within our response or within our Google Sheet, and then we'd have it here to pull and reference. But this should be sufficient. So that we can do that, and then what we're able to do from here is we can actually hit test setup, and that will post that through. So if I hit test setup now, that's actually going to create us a URL where we can then copy this URL and actually see the result. So let's do that now. So here you can see that it's posted that directly to LinkedIn. And that works really well. We can actually click on this link as well.
Collaboration is key for team.
And that will take us to the video link here. So everything works as expected. Let's go back to Zapier and let's close off that Zap. Right, so now we've tested that, we know this actually works. So I think that's fairly descriptive of the process we've got. We know we've got a trigger. We've got our get last included row, get random number, get the random row, and then post to LinkedIn. Now what we can do is we can hit the publish button. So if I close this down on here, fix your Zap, what we've got. Let's go on here a sec. Test trigger. There we go. Okay. So I just wanted us to test that. Each step they like you to test to make sure it's working as described. So we can hit then publish, because at the moment this is a draft. And here we can actually rename this particular Zap. So we can call this weekly LinkedIn post, and then we can hit publish. And there we go. We can go to home, and that's going to take us back. We can go to Zaps. We can then go to our demos. Where's that created that then? There we go. Oh, it's got it here. So if we click in here, it's in. Oh, it is in demos. Okay, let's go back. I think it's just taking a little while. Ah, there we go. It's just a slight delay on the refresh for the Zap that we've just created. So now we've gone into our demos directory. So if we go home now, we can, from our Zaps, we can then go demos, and then here we've got the option to tick it, and we can do some mass selection, or on the little arrow here, we can do various different things. We can duplicate, we can look at the history. It gives you a view of the apps that you're using within it. You can turn off and delete the Zap. And again, you can do that within the main menu, or you can click here and turn it off. So you can create multiple of these. You could even go into the Zap and have multiple different actions that happen. It could then go off and post the detail from the Google Sheet to Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You might even want to post it as an email to your team. Whatever you want to do, you've got that full capability within Zapier itself. And Zapier is great because it's really around automating these kind of tasks that you might be doing on a daily or weekly basis. And it's a very powerful tool in order to utilize for things like marketing and things like LinkedIn, as we've just seen here. One additional point to make is if we go into the Zap we've just generated, we do have the ability within the Zap itself to view the history. So we can see the change history that we've made to this particular Zap, and we can filter that by days, types, etc. when we've turned it on and off, and publish versions. We also then at the bottom have the ability to see the different versions. So we've got on version 2 at the moment. If we go to version 1, we can see what version 1 looks like, and we can switch to use that in the current version as well, and then we can edit, republish, so you've got a full visibility there of changes and change control. And that's just another really nice implemented feature of Zapier. So now we've played around with Zapier, let's look at the pros and cons. So what are the pros of Zapier? Well, firstly, it's incredibly quick to prototype. In this short session here, within 20 minutes, you can build a Zap that is fairly complex and is using functionality there that enables you to automate something that is reasonably complex. There's a great selection of app integrations. You've got Google integration, Microsoft integration, even Dynamics 365 as well, and many more. It's also very simple to navigate, and I found it extremely easy to find extended help in order to locate certain functions in order to implement the Zap that we completed in this session. And I'd then say, I see this as being a sort of sales or marketing department's dream. It's something that they can really utilize here to automate monotonous tasks and get quite creative with the process. And on top of that, it's really something they can actually self-serve themselves. Lastly, it's incredibly cost effective as well. So there is a free version of Zapier that is limited to a trigger and a single action. Obviously, that in itself would be quite limited, and we've used sort of 3 or 4 actions in this particular example during this session. So for that, you would need to do the paid service. But the lowest level paid service is about £15 or £16 a month. So if you think about it, if you're going to be saving at least an hour a month on some of these automations, which I believe would be very simple to do, you're getting your money's worth, and there's a very good ROI there as well. So then let's look at the cons. So I think it's fairly obvious here that Zapier is really focused on automation, not really integration. So it is a great tool for automating certain tasks, but again, I wouldn't consider this in any way some sort of enterprise application integration software at all. But then it doesn't claim to be. It is predominantly in the market around automating certain tasks. And that's absolutely fine. And I believe that this product is doing that really, really well. Well, that's it for this session. Thank you very much for joining me. If you've got any questions around Zapier or any other system automation platforms, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Equally, you can comment on the YouTube channel. Thank you very much.